Welcome back to another episode of Girls Know Nothing. During last week's episode, I introduced this year's International Women's Day theme, which is #EmbraceEquity. Equity recognises that each person has different circumstances and allocates exact resources and opportunities needed to reach an equal outcome. In September 2022, YouGov found that 1 in 8 people who bleed are likely to struggle to afford sanitary products that they need for the year. And in 2021, the British government abolished its 5% rate of VAT on sanitary products, also known as its tampon tax. Nevertheless, 48% of Britons think that this has been ineffective at helping reduce the levels of period poverty in the UK. YouGov went on to find out that 29% of Britons also say they've never heard of the term period poverty. But are our conceptions of what constitutes period poverty actually correct? Well, here to discuss that with me is Rachel, the Chief Executive Officer of Bloody Good Period. Bloody Good Period are a non-profit organisation that fight menstrual equity for all of those who bleed, including distributing products and providing proper menstrual education. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's all right. It's like we were having brief conversations off camera, and I was saying to you that I feel like I've learned more from you in like a space of 5 minutes than I have from any form of like education I had my entire school life and actually my adult life as well, which I think is why what you do is so important.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, and we can talk about lots of other topics. And I think I've had a similar experience. I've learned more being involved in Bloody Good Period in the last 5 years than I did through years and years of actually having periods myself. Even having 2 children, there are things that I learn now that I think I really should have known that years and years ago. And yeah, you're right. This is part of what we do. Education, normalizing so that people can talk about periods. We think everybody should be able to talk about periods, whether you have them or not. And that's all part of getting products, but also information and the support you need to manage your body, understand what's happening to it every month, and live in a way that you're not ashamed of your body and what it's doing, because these are normal things that nobody needs to feel ashamed of and we should all have knowledge over.
So what is your normal day-to-day at Bloody Good Period?
Oh, good question. I mean, I don't think there is normal. The things we end up doing are so varied. So let's see, to give you a flavour of this week, I had to fill in a really long application form to get some funding from a corporate funder, which is brilliant. And of course, they have due diligence processes, which includes a very long form with lots of documents and details to give them. So nice bit of admin, but it will result in this amazing funding, which helps us do what we do. We had a team meeting where we learned about the menopause. So maybe we'll come on to talk a bit more about that later, why we're doing that. But we want to understand menstrual health throughout the life course. And we are doing our own training to become what we call Bloody Good Employers. And we've got a workplace training and accreditation program, which all companies can and should do. And we were going through our own internal training to do that. So the team got together and learned about menopause. We also ate some really good cookies that day because it was Valentine's Day. So the team has been baking. Yeah, very important. We are planning fundraising events for later in the year. So we are just getting into setting dates and lineup for Bloody Funny, which is our annual comedy night fundraiser. You should definitely come. And we're also working on an event called Bloody Good Music. We held the first last year with Clara Amfo, and we're doing another one this year. So it's really varied. And then, of course, on the operation side, we are working out how we get products to people because the demand is really going up. Our budgets are being squeezed because obviously fundraising is really tricky. Products are also more expensive. So I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but like everything else, the cost of period products has really gone up in the last year. And that includes for us buying in bulk for our partners as well. But our partners, which includes things like drop-in centres for refugees and food banks, community support groups, are experiencing unprecedented levels of demand from people who are being pushed into making these impossible financial decisions between life's essentials. And if you have a period, that includes period products. You know, they're not optional. They're not a luxury, despite what adverts might want to tell you or the tax that you mentioned might have told you. So we are having to provide more and more of those and working out how we do that in the best, most efficient way to help as many people as possible is something that we're constantly looking at. So we're working with brands to get donations in as well, working with new partners. So that is the bulk of our everyday work.
I guess it must be really hard and very challenging for you guys as an organisation at this current moment in time, because every time you turn on the news, there's a new thing about cost of living crisis, which means obviously the demand will go up. And like you said, the amount of money you're able to bring in will drop as well.
Yeah.
And, I don't actually know if this is a possibility. When you go to food banks, like, are period products ever considered as a necessity when you go to something like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. So yes, sometimes, but not always. And that's a big part of our work as well. So this is a generalization. And of course, this won't happen every single time. But imagine if you are a cis man who has never had a period and you happen to be running a food bank. If you've never had a period and you don't talk to anybody who has a period because, that's a bit weird and shameful and embarrassing, and you have never been taught about it at school, how are you going to know what products the people using your food bank might need? And that's the same scenario in lots and lots of different places, workplaces, schools. Just this week, we've been hearing about the response to the earthquake in Turkey and Syria, where the response is being coordinated exclusively by men, by members of the military. So period products aren't being mentioned, and the shame there is so strong from a cultural perspective that women aren't able to ask for the products they need. So this idea that periods are not factored in, that it's better to just ignore them, whisper about them, maybe use some euphemisms, rather than actually factor in the fact that this happens and people who menstruate need products and they need them every single month, really has consequences.
Yeah, I know it's one of the biggest parts of what you guys as an organisation do. But, all of the time I spent growing up, because there was no education for any form of menstruation. I said to you, I went to an all-girls school, so the chances are pretty much every single person at that school menstruated. I remember, even when I entered the workplace in my mid-20s, putting tampons up my sleeve because I didn't want to offend my male colleagues or people that didn't have periods. And they're not offensive. They're not offensive weapons. And I was embarrassed or ashamed to be going to the toilet and seen with a wrapper in my hand.
Yeah. But the culture that we live in tells you that that's the case. If you think about adverts for these products, they have blue liquid, they have odor-free technology, they even have rustle-free wrappers. I mean, when you start to break that down, that is madness, isn't it?
I didn't even know that was a thing.
It's the thing that personally aggravates me the most. The whole idea that you cannot not possibly give an indication that you might be managing this most normal of biological functions, and that companies can make money off selling you a rustle-free wrapper. They've actually put time and money into innovating to make their products not make any noise. That's mind-blowing. At the same time as loads of people can't even afford to buy them.
Yeah, that's really bizarre. I think as well, if you're using a bathroom where people menstruate, the chances are everyone in that bathroom also has a wrapper. That's going to make no one thinks you're going to be eating a chocolate bar in the toilet. So I didn't even know that was a thing. I know there are a lot of different products out there, and it's very hard to navigate what's right for you. And that's why I also think education is so important, because there's moon cups and stuff now.
Yeah, there's huge variety. And that's one of the education sessions that we run for both people who use our services. So we run education for refugees and asylum seekers who will really struggle typically to access information about how to look after their period, the products that are available to them. But we also run similar training sessions for our partners. So, you were asking about, do food banks provide period products? Well, hopefully they will if they're one of our partners, because we'll provide this training on, hey, these are the products available, the difference between this type of pad and what's a liner and how do cups work. So we provide all of that support. We also talk about language, so helping people to talk about periods in a really inclusive way and also a shame-free way. And just one really important thing on language, actually, we never use the term sanitary at BGP.
Okay.
Because the implication there is that periods are somehow unsanitary. Same for hygiene. Are they unhygienic? No, they're not. They're just normal. So we say period products. And again, it's a really simple thing you can change that's actually really powerful, because language is important, right? There's nothing shameful about our bodies doing what they're supposed to be doing.
How do people become partners with BGP?
So lots have been working with us since we started nearly 7 years ago. I hope I've got my maths right. So our founder Gabby was volunteering at a drop-in centre for asylum seekers when she realised that period products were not being given out. When she asked where they were, she was told, "Oh, we have those, for if there's an emergency." But of course, if you have a period and you don't have a product, that's an emergency. And she also knew that people were not in a position to be asking openly for those products. So she set out about collecting products. And we've grown from there. So some partners are from those early days, like that initial organisation where Gabby was volunteering are still a partner, and others linked to that organisation. And then lots more have come to us as we've grown and done more communications about what we're here to do. And we have a process by which we talk to them, understand who they're supporting, and how we can best help. So we always want to make sure we can be there for people every single month. There's no use like delivering products 1 month and then disappearing because they're going to need them again the next month. So we want those like long-term sustainable relationships, and we want to be able to provide that support as well.
Do you ever get schools reaching out to you to like help support you?
Yeah, we do. So we don't officially work with schools because other organisations do.
Okay.
And the government did instigate a free period product scheme for schools that started just prior to the first lockdown. So it still exists. Schools can opt in to that to get products. We still get requests from schools saying the funding isn't enough and it doesn't provide the products they need. The evaluation of that scheme so far has also shown that it doesn't come with education. It's just the product. So actually, it's nowhere near as effective as it should be because teachers don't have the language or the knowledge to talk to students about periods. Not exclusively, of course, but often. And then students don't have the confidence or the language to ask for the products they need because it's really shameful and they've been told by that advert that they can't possibly tell anyone that they might be menstruating. So it's a vicious circle, and we're hearing stories of products sat in cupboards and not being used because there's no education to take away that shame and stigma.
It's like I was saying to you off camera that the first time I'd ever used a tampon, I was sat in my PHSE teacher was a cis man.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to ask him about how to use a tampon. I was 14 years old. And, the only way I learned was to be sat in an English block cubicle with one friend on one side and one friend on the other and talking me through it.
Yeah.
And I found that quite embarrassing, even though they were my best friends and, we all had the same issues every month or we were all been through that stage. But I felt embarrassed and I felt frustrated that an adult or somebody that I trusted wasn't able to tell me that, or somebody that should be able to be looking after me, really.
Yeah.
And I felt let down. And I don't even know if it's changed 13 years down the line.
I think that there are some changes and there is more openness around it. And we've even seen things like some retailers now have a period products aisle instead of a sanitary products aisle. So there is some change, but there's still also a really long way to go. I mean, the stats that you had at the beginning about so many people not even knowing what period poverty is, or that it could be a real, very real issue, I think shows that we've still got a long way to go. And even, thinking about our charity's name, we still get people who are outraged by it. And it is not the bloody word that they're objecting to, because that's quite, a quintessential British swear word. It's not even really a swear word anymore. No, it's the period bit they're objecting to, which blows my mind.
You can just see by my face that my brain's going why is that an offensive word?
Yeah.
And I don't, when you see on social media, especially Twitter, for example, when someone talks about menstruation, it becomes people are outraged by it. And I know in certain cultures that when I went to Japan, I bought menstruation products out there. They took them off the counter because I was I don't care. I just put them on the counter. They took them off and put them in a black bag so no one can see what you've bought. And I was okay, well, that's your cultural thing, but I would never expect it here. And people think period poverty doesn't exist in the UK.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely happens here. So I think there are some supermarket schemes where you can go and ask for products if you can't afford them, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
Access to products, most important thing. but you have to use a code word. So I forget which name it is, but you say, I'm making it up, but Sandra. And they'll give you a discreet bag of products to take away so that no one can see what you've asked for. Now, I am all for people being able to get the products they need. But the fact that we've built this society that means people have to use code words and then hide the products away for something that is entirely normal, not dirty, and actually responsible for life on the planet. You know, periods are essentially linked to human biology. Yet we've developed this really shameful culture. And of course, it's an extension of sexism, the patriarchy, controlling bodies of women and people who menstruate. It's another means of minimizing, sanitizing, like keeping us quiet.
I think as well, when people that menstruate openly talk about symptoms that come with your period, unfortunately, there are a long list of symptoms. But I do think adverts for these products do minimize. Like when people that don't menstruate see those adverts, they're like, oh, it must be nothing because she's riding a horse or she's going swimming. And I'm like, I've never wanted to ride a horse when I'm not on my period.
Right, exactly.
Let alone when I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think pain is such an interesting area. We're not disabled by periods, or we certainly shouldn't be anyway. And if people are experiencing period pain that is disabling, that takes you out every single month, then that is a sign that something else is going on. And I think that's another problem often, that people can't reach out for the support they need because their pain has been minimized. They've been told, oh, it's fine. It's all just part of it. And you have to learn to live with it. Most definitely not true. But that leads to things like the diagnosis time for things like endometriosis being years. I mean, I think it's 9 years currently for endometriosis to be fully diagnosed. So 9 years people are living with pain. So it's a real issue. So it has real consequences that we don't talk about those things. Severe pain should always be investigated. Blood Your Period has some great tips on how to advocate for yourself at the doctors. We've just recently put that on our social media. We'll get it on our website as well. So you can go and have informed conversations where you can advocate for yourself and your needs. I wish we didn't have to provide that kind of support for people, but we do. If you are having severe pain that is taking you out all the time, that needs investigating. Some period pain, I'm incredibly lucky. I don't have a menstrual health condition, but I need ibuprofen every single month. That's fairly standard. And it's fairly standard for a lot of the women and people who have periods who I meet. It's a lot of the stories we hear. But I'm not sure that's really understood by people who don't have periods. And even if you do have that really fortunate experience of periods, I think it's vital to understand that other people might have completely different ones.
Yeah.
So this is something we had lots about when we did our research for our Bloody Good Employers programme, that even if you're, a female manager, say, you're in quite a senior position, you're looking after a team, if you have your specific experience of periods and you don't need more than an ibuprofen or 2 every month, but you never talk about periods with anyone else because, shame and stigma and taboo, and it's not professional in the workplace. How could you support someone who potentially has endometriosis or heavy bleeding or needs the flexibility of working from home or more frequent breaks once a month? You can't understand those unless you actually talk about it.
No, and I think people fail to realise that when you're costing up a period, it's not just the items that you need to menstruate. It's also the ibuprofen, the chocolate bar.
Yeah.
If it's not the necessity, but, things like that you need to make yourself feel better.
Yeah.
It all adds up. And when you're doing it monthly as well.
Yes. And then there are other items as well. Underwear.
Yes.
Cleaning your underwear and your bed sheets, replacing them. Those are common occurrences for people who have periods. And we're actually doing a project at the moment trying to factor in all of those costs so we could get an accurate picture of what a lifetime cost of a period will be, because it's not just products, and those are expensive enough. It's all those other things. And then if you start to factor in, I have to take time off school or work, so I've got missed income potentially as well, then it's huge. It's really huge, which when you're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, so all those budgets are under pressure from all directions. I mean, this is the reality of period poverty, and it's why we need to address it and not pretend it doesn't exist.
The first time I ever learned about period poverty was when I'd heard about girls missing school, or people that menstruate missing school because they couldn't afford the items to be able to menstruate in public, essentially. And I think that's where that have big repercussions down the line, because if you're missing out school, you're going to lose out on those vital socialization skills and your education. I guess that's probably why the education you guys provide is so important. But then I think that a lot of people that don't realize that your period isn't just 3 days or 5 days in a month, that it's a whole lifetime experience, and you're going to forever play catch up to that unless somebody really steps in. I know that in the news a lot, when we were talking about COVID, especially during lockdowns and things, people were always talking about, I've had a lot of experience of people talking about how it affects the genders differently and how women have come worse off for a lot of different reasons from the pandemic. What was Bloody Good Period's experience of working with menstruation during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, the demand went up hugely in the early days. So that first lockdown, where, we weren't prepared for the reality of what that was like. We were supplying entire wards of NHS hospitals with period products for frontline workers, because they were either working so many hours that they couldn't get the breaks or to leave to access period products, and they're not provided in hospitals, which again is crazy when you think about it. Or if frontline workers were making it to the shops, they were finding there weren't any left because they were being stockpiled in much the same way that loo paper or pasta was. Yeah. It's a bit crazy looking back. But if we needed a sign that these are essential, then stockpiling is it. Yeah. Right? So we were supplying NHS frontline workers with period products. And that didn't, last throughout the pandemic. It was in that really early stage. But I remember thinking, wow, this is a real sign of how essential these products are and how essential our work is. And it shouldn't be. We shouldn't be making that happen. But it's a gap because, again, it hasn't been factored in. And then we saw that pattern replicate, just of increasing demand. So many community support groups set up during COVID, people furloughed, unable to work, having to isolate, people with a lot of health conditions, often which can then have an effect on periods, were isolating and couldn't access period products, sometimes because of shortages, often because they couldn't afford them. So we entirely changed our way of working during the pandemic to meet that need. So we started sending products out directly to our partners rather than operating kind of a physical distribution system. And I mean, with the small operations team we have, it's 2 people. They did an incredible job meeting that level of demand, making our system work for the lockdown restrictions. And actually, that's something we've stuck with. So we've got a really, really efficient model that we're really proud of. It means we can get products all over the country. We buy them in bulk. We buy exactly the products that people request, rather than giving the products people donate, because they are not always the same thing. No. Guaranteed to be new. In date, again, we had huge problems pre-COVID with people donating, tatty pads that have been at the bottom of your handbag for a month, but also out-of-date tampons, because lots of people don't know that tampons expire.
I did not know that either.
Tampons expire, check your dates. So we've got a really efficient model now, honed by lockdown. So, it's good that silver linings have come out of it. But that's when we really saw demand starting to go up dramatically. So to have the cost of living crisis so soon after that, I mean, it's just really one crisis after another. And then, of course, on top of those crises, we support refugees. And there are so many crises around the world that people are fleeing from, that demand has gone up there as well. So in the last year, we've been supporting people from Ukraine, of course, but also from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Sierra Leone, countries that are not in the news anymore, but the need is still there.
Yeah, and I guess it's providing products that people need as opposed to just whatever is donated is because everybody has a preference, and it's a luxury for, I know that I'm privileged to be able to have my preference in brand, in the way that you use them. Yeah. And I think if I was in a situation where I had to change completely, I wouldn't feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And we always prioritize what the people who we're working with want, what their preferences are. They know themselves and their bodies and their periods. That's what matters most. So we run education sessions on the types of products that are available, but we never say, and you should really use X, Y, and Z. That is not our place. And especially where we're talking to refugees, for example, been through indescribable trauma. They do not want a charity lecturing them about the types of products they should be using. That is their choice. And we are here to facilitate that choice, which is why buying the exact items direct, and we get discounts, of course, while we're at it, because we're liaising directly with the suppliers, is a much better model.
Why do you think some members of the public get so angry about open conversations on menstruation?
I mean, I think it really goes back to that shame and stigma. If, do you remember at school? I certainly do. The boys being sent out of the room for, the talk, so the girls can have the talk and the boys go and learn about something else. That's probably a different podcast. I think it all stems, a lot of it, from that, and that is reinforced by those adverts, by our well-meaning older relatives reinforcing the things that they've been told, that it's something to be hidden away and don't tell people. And no, you can't possibly ask your dad, brother, partner to go and buy products for you. I mean, of course you can. I think everybody on this planet, if you don't have a period yourself, you are at minimum going to care for someone who does.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we all want to understand what's going on here? But the culture that has been built up, I mean, goes back to that ultimate word, patriarchy. My daughter often asks me, Mummy, why is this? I'm like, okay, patriarchy, but I should probably give you a more detailed answer. But ultimately, that's why.
It's really, starting this podcast, it really blows my mind, the amount of things that go back to that one word.
Yeah.
And this is just another thing to add on top of that huge pile already. I know, even off camera, I was saying to you that I had a t-shirt on that was quoting somebody saying the taxpayer is not responsible for your period. And I wholly disagree with that statement, because if the taxpayer can be responsible for contraception,
right? Yeah.
Which is a choice at the end of the day, why is there no responsibility on something that I have no control over?
Yes. Yeah. These things are not optional. They're not a luxury. You can't opt out of it. So let's build it into the way our society operates and the support we offer to our young people, to people in school, to the most vulnerable members of our society. At the moment, refugees and asylum seekers are not getting any support for the fact that they menstruate. So we might work with a family who have teenage daughters in the house. There's no extra money to provide period products for them, even though lots of those people have also been through trauma, which means their periods are incredibly heavy. Yeah. And we hear that a lot from the people we work with, but it's just not part of the consideration we make. And of course, that's an active choice when we look at the hostile environment that is being targeted at refugees and asylum seekers, especially right now.
I think earlier you made a comment that was that blew my mind about how there's a conversation about whether women should take contraception so they don't menstruate.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really unfair and big ask for somebody to do. You're essentially saying that I would rather pump you with hormones than provide it's essentially a piece of cotton, just put in a really fancy way.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember, so this was a request we had from a magazine, so to provide our expert comments on whether this was a way that women and people who menstruate could save money during the cost of living crisis, go on the pill, stop your periods. Hey presto, you don't have to buy pads. And myself and another member of the team had to read it several times to check we were understanding that we really were being asked this, because it felt like we slipped into the Handmaid's Tale or something. I mean, hormonal contraception is a brilliant choice for some people, but it should always be that, a choice and an informed one, because that has consequences as well. It should never be a way of controlling your body so that you can afford to exist. That's really wild when you start to think about it, and not something we should be asking people to do in comparison to, you're right, the very simple step of just making products more accessible for people.
I think it's... as well, when we were talking about it, it blew my mind a little bit, because surely providing contraception is far more expensive than it is at providing menstrual products.
Yeah.
And this whole time we've been doing this podcast, that's all I've been thinking about. I was like, it was probably somebody who doesn't menstruate that thought this was a good idea in the first place, or even a possibility. But like I said to you, like I'm not on any hormonal contraception because that's the best choice for me. And thinking about the difference between the two of us, like me on hormonal contraception was really bad for like my mental health.
Yeah.
So to be asked to do that against my own choice, I'm very, like I keep saying, I'm very privileged to not have to be in that situation, but I couldn't imagine having that on top of a lot of things that people are already dealing with.
Yeah. And often that's a line we use a lot. We provide products so that people just have one less thing to worry about. Because if you are dealing with having to flee your home country because of war, or you've lost your job because of the pandemic, or your household budgets are under pressure because of the cost of living crisis, to have to worry about managing your period on top of that, it just shouldn't be an issue. It is. So we're here to get those products to people. But it's quite a simple thing that you can provide and take that stress and worry away from people. And it does cause stress and worry. You know, we were talking about schools earlier. We've had a real flurry of emails recently from parents who are saying their teenage daughters are not being allowed to leave class to change their period product. They are being told they need a medical note in order to leave class. A period is not a medical condition, it's just a reality. It has consequences because they're sitting there worried about leaking. And imagine if you do leak, what is going to happen next, given all that shame and stigma that we've talked about? So what might you do next month? I just stay at home.
Yeah. I'm sat here like nodding my head because I can remember being in those exact same situations, especially like when the teacher doesn't menstruate, so then doesn't understand like, well, you should have gone at this time. And it's like, well, I didn't decide that now it was going to start.
Exactly. And especially as a young person having periods, your cycles will be unpredictable to start off with.
I can vouch for that.
Right? That's just a reality. It's how it works at the start of the process. So you can't be held responsible for not knowing it was going to happen. It's what happens.
Earlier, you were talking about how Bloody Good Period now educate on the whole life cycle of, the lifespan of your menstruation.
Yeah.
And I said to you that I know nothing about menopause, apart from the fact it will happen at some point in my lifetime.
Yeah.
Why is it so important that we also learn about menopause when we talk about menstruation?
There's been such a focus, I think, on menopause recently. Lots of media conversations around it. Lots of women who've experienced menopause or who are experiencing it talking about it. I think that's brilliant. We need to understand all the stuff that comes before it, as well as the end of that process, i.e. menopause. Just for understanding what our bodies are doing, but also someone on my team came up with this amazing line about menopause stigma and that sense of shame about it, because that definitely exists. It's basically the same menstrual stigma that we've been talking about throughout, with ageism on top.
Yeah.
Right. So we've got to tackle that because it is stopping women from working, from participating in society fully, from being able to live a full life. If you look at rates of mental health issues, they peak amongst women going through menopause, or in those years where they're likely to be going through menopause. We shouldn't be subjecting women to that. We can do stuff about this. And information, as we talked about, is one of the biggest things. I've had friends who are the same age as me be told, you can't possibly be going through menopause, you're too young. No. The age I am is precisely the right age for perimenopause, that period of up to 10 years before your periods stop, to be experiencing symptoms. If we're dismissing women again and saying, oh no, you're too young, it's just, life, then we're not taking them seriously. We're not helping them make changes, lifestyle changes, potentially HRT, if that works for some people, that could really help. And then you're pushing women out of society. And that's not what anybody needs. That's not good for anybody, male or female.
I guess it's when you're talking to someone that supposedly loves and cares for you and they're saying, oh, you're too young, that stops you also getting medical help, right?
Yes, exactly.
And you're just entering or forcing people that menstruate into a very vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And even when I was younger, my mum, she won't mind me saying this, when my mum was going through like the premenopausal stage, like I just didn't understand. And there was only other 2 men in my house who definitely didn't understand. And I felt guilty and helpless because I didn't know what to do.
Yes.
So what can somebody do to support somebody that is potentially going through that menopause stage in their life?
I think openness is just so important, and being able to ask for the help and support and flexibility you need. So something we do all the time at Bloody Good Period, yes, we're a small team, but we just talk to each other all the time. And we often work around things like, let me think of an example. I'm not a morning person. I have kids, so I have to be. I don't have a choice. But I would really rather not do like a meeting before 10 a.m. if I can help it. Yeah. That is my personal preference. And other members of the team will have other preferences. When we're in a particular stage of our cycle or a particular stage of like our hormonal journey, like menopause, those kind of preferences or needs for how we get the best out of our lives are going to be amplified. So we've got to be able to trust ourselves to know those things, to ask for support in accommodating them, and work with the people around us, whether that's professionally or with our families. My husband knows not to talk to me before 10 a.m. To make life work in the best possible way, rather than going, oh, well, I just have to suck it up and get on with it because that's how life is. We can shape life to be how we need it to be, to work for us. And everyone's going to be different. But understanding how our hormones and our bodies are working is such a key part of that. And if we don't talk about it, what chance have we got of really designing a life that works?
What would you say to businesses that don't necessarily believe that learning about menstruation is important for their inclusion policies?
I mean, they're totally wrong. It's so interesting. Everything we've talked about today really underlines this thing we often say at BGP, that periods are like a lens or a gateway to so many other issues about equality and equity, making sure that people's needs are factored into how we set up workplaces, for example. And that's why we have developed our Bloody Good Employers programme, so that we can improve the culture, the communications and policies around periods, because it has benefits for everybody, but it can start to help you really think about, are we being inclusive of everyone? Are we meeting everybody's needs? Do we have flexible working for women and people who menstruate, but also for people who don't menstruate? Because flexible working has benefits for everybody too. So it's a starting point, but it opens up so many other conversations.
Obviously, International Women's Day is coming up, and it is a massive part of like the activism calendar, and it's integral for a lot of women to celebrate, the history and the struggles that we've had. But one of my concerns every year when it comes around is that we pick it up on International Women's Day and we drop it off on the 9th of March. How can we, or people in general, be better allies to people who menstruate and help them past and before the 8th of March?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question. You can't solve all the issues on one day, and this work has to happen every single day. So I think there's lots of things you can do. You'll see loads of stuff all over social media for International Women's Day, but use that to get inspired and educated about all the different things you can do to be an ally. Follow us on social media. I know that sounds really simple and maybe non-effective, but actually you can learn incredible things. So that guide to how to advocate for yourself at the doctors, the thing we were talking about earlier, that tampons have expiry dates, that is the kind of thing you'll find on our social media. And then you can go tell everyone, you can start these conversations, and that has genuine power. People talking about periods, I really think every conversation just starts to chip away at that shame and that stigma and those messages from the ads about not telling anyone and hiding it away. It all has this amazing kind of snowball effect. So learn and then share, I think, is so powerful. There are also lots of campaigning things you can do. So this year, Bloody Good Period will be calling on the government to make period equity, so access to products, but also to the right care and support and education, part of what they are pledging to do for the future. So there'll be lots more campaigning actions that we'll be talking about in coming months. So come and follow us, sign up to our email list. You can find out about the ways you can help. Make sure that this is on the agenda, not just shoved to the side and whispered about. And then, of course, if you are in a position to donate, it makes such a massive difference. It does not have to be a huge amount of money because we know times are tough for everybody, but we take donations and turn them into pads for people who can't access them. We've got the efficient model that we talked about earlier. And right now, when we're meeting these just crazy levels of demand, I think unprecedented is an overused word.
Yeah.
But I can't actually think of a better one. It is unprecedented, the levels of need that we're seeing, because people are under such pressure. So if you're in a position to help, we would love that. But sharing and talking is so important as well.
If somebody is listening and feels like they're not being supported with their menstruation, what advice would you give them?
And we don't give individual advice. Maybe I might need to just make that really clear. But I'm trying to think the best way to answer that. I think it is about empowering yourself with information. So there are lots of sources of information out there. We've got links on our website to where you can find out more things about what's going on in your body every month, the questions you need to be asking, and how to have the best possible relationship, say, with your doctor, if you need to go and ask for support, how to advocate for yourself. And I think rejecting that shame is really important as well. And that's hard. It really is. This is stuff that's really ingrained. And we need to treat ourselves with compassion as we do that and acknowledge that it's hard because we operate in this world. But there is nothing shameful about having a human body that does human things. And I think that's probably the starting point. Reject that shame, equip yourself with the information, and access support like the guide that we have to get the support that you specifically need. I think
I probably worded that last question badly.
Right.
I was more thinking about as well, if somebody is struggling with access
to products,
what's the best route to take, to be honest?
I mean, there are lots of the community support groups, food banks, etc. We're working hard to try and make sure that period products are factored into as many of those as we can. And there are other organisations doing similar work as well. So those can be your starting point. And if they're not providing period products, then ask them to look into doing that, and you can give our name. We can't take on every single partner in the country without the money, which is a really challenging position to be in. And anyone, involved in charity is in that tough situation right now. But we want to help as many people as possible. So those local groups are probably your first starting point, and then point them in our direction if they don't have the products there.
Amazing. I always finish off the podcast with a very similar question. Obviously, the whole point of your job is to try and eventually make yourself redundant.
Yeah.
But what would you say to people that, firstly are angry at the idea of being open about conversation on menstruation, but also that deny that period poverty is a big societal issue?
We have conversations at Bloody Good Period every single day that underline the consequences of period poverty, from people not having access to products and the stress and anxiety that causes, but also the physical realities, people overusing products, people using really cheap products that cause infections. And then they have to go and get prescriptions, which is an extra cost. And of course, deal with the medical consequences of that. There are physical consequences. There are mental health consequences. But there are bigger ones as well of, things like we've heard about people living in hostel accommodation who are seeking asylum, bleeding on sheets because they have heavy menstrual bleeding and not being able to get clean sheets for a week. That is a deliberate part of the hostile environment that has been created by the government to deter asylum seekers for, no good reason. This stuff has consequences. It is not just about whether you have a pad. It goes so much broader than that. And then when you factor in, not being able to talk about this, the worry of, do I have a menstrual health condition that needs treatment? Am I in menopause? Do I need lifestyle changes or more support to enable me to participate fully in life and in society? Not talking about it has all of these consequences. So yes, it's about pads, but it's about all these other things too. And that's why we call for what we say is menstrual equity, where the simple fact of having a period doesn't disadvantage you, doesn't hold you back in life. It doesn't stop you from doing things that people who don't have periods would not think twice about. So that's what we want, a world that is menstrually equitable for everybody.
I think, do you know what? Even having a conversation with you, I feel like I've learned so much. And it goes to show that even though I've had menstruation for, God, like 14 years, I'm still learning how my body works for me. So I want to say that I'm really grateful for your time and for teaching me. And
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
It's been great to talk to you. Thanks for having me.